So, hi everyone, my name is Gabor, and honestly, I'm a bit embarrassed. This is my very first Zoom presentation. I can't see your face, and anyway, let's see how it goes. So, back to the feelings. So today, I'd like to a little bit talk about what I found is a really essential thing between security and developers. So I'm coming from more from a security background, but also wrote a bit of code. And what I see is that security is always kind of an obstacle for developers. And today I would like to understand a little bit, or I would like to just provide a bit more information. Why do I feel this? And this is actually one of the things why we are why we are here. So it's really interesting because in the last couple of years we spent a lot of time to understand why security is ignored. And actually in 2021, so last year, there was a free and open source report from Linux Foundations, and what they said is that developers spend less than 3% of their time on security issues. And actually, I was wondering that, wow, this is quite a few times. So it's like 3% is compared to nothing, compared to all the time that you guys just simply do with coding. So if you just think of that 30 to 40% of your time is on debugging, then 3% of your time in security issues is quite a few. So what I would like to talk today is that what we really think is that there are certain guidelines like OWASP Top 10. And OWASP Top 10 is just a project coming from the Open Web Application Security Project. And this is like a list where the community would like to somehow provide a bit more information for you guys that here are a list, here are certain items that are considered to be the most important for today, and here are so the thing here is that this list is mainly coming from vendor information. So certain vendors are providing information. Certain vendors are scanning websites, and this website information is coming back to the OWASP project. And also there are some folks who are checking whether this list is up to date or not. And after a while, there's a selection process, and this selection process is going to analyze the top 10 candidates. So the last list is coming from 2017. And I had a personal chat with Martin Knobloch. He's one of the global board members of OWASP. And what he said is that the list for the 2020 is already ready. But the problem is that currently there's a bit of, so they have a bit of lack of resources when to or how to publish it. So there's a community who is going to, at a certain point, publish the top 10 items, the top 10 vulnerabilities of this OWASP Top 10. So here's the thing. So OWASP Top 10 is a guardrail, as I said, and many people just consider it as a must-have to meet. But at the same time, what we see is that it's just a single item in the whole story. If we miss the holistic approach, we are going to fail. Because, for example, if you see this beautiful picture, you have a really nice house on the left side, and you have an old ancient house on the right side, which breaks. So the wall breaks on, as you see, the front wall breaks. And this is when security comes to you. So we keep releasing new and new software. We are adding new and new features. We are fine-tuning our processes. We are fine-tuning everything. But at a certain point, we just forget to go back to the basics and add security to the whole process. And at a certain point, we face certain breaches, and we are wondering why. And today, this whole presentation is about understanding a little bit that here we find certain items. So on the left lane, you see the list from 2017. On the right lane, you see the proposal from a guy who is called Philip Derricks. Actually, this whole presentation idea came from a LinkedIn post that was shared by Martin Knobloch. And I checked his post, and actually there was so it was a bit misleading. So what he wrote is that, hey guys, here's the proposal of the new, here's the new OWASP proposal, let's discuss it. And I thought that this is an official proposal, but it was not actually. And but anyway, there was a nice discussion going on with this. So what I would like to tell you today is that to understand why these items on this list, and I wouldn't like to delve into the details. I wouldn't like to just you know, go into that what cross-site scripting is, because I'm sure that you find many resources on the internet what cross-site scripting really is. But today I would like to a little bit get a feedback from our point of view, from my point of view, why this is a list that is good enough. So here's the thing. So Martin, I had a discussion with Martin, and what he said is that I asked, how is it possible that A1 injection, so injections are still the first hit on this list? And what he said, hey, Gabor, this is because of legacy systems. And I was wondering why? And he said that most of the legacy systems are not exposed to the internet. And as a result, the old-fashioned SQL injections and those injections that you feel that they are way behind us are not exposed to the internet. So these old services are on the internet. So they are going to be attacked. So all our systems will be affected just like, I don't know, 10 years before. And I said, that's great. So what to do now? And of course, what we can do is just add some mediator services. But you know, ORMs and other solutions are quite difficult to add to legacy systems. So it's one of the reasons why injections are still the first hit on this list. So the second one is the broken authentication. So there is no change in the proposal compared to the 2017 list. And so broken authentication is, many of us think that this is when someone steals our usernames and passwords, but it's more than that. So it's like session hijacking attacks, session fixation attacks. So there are many variants of this when you don't have access to the actual credentials itself, but you steal the session information, for example, and use it as a vehicle to move forward in the system. So this is one of the things. And because we are using more and more cloud native services, including, for example, identity as identity providers like Auth0 and Okta, this vulnerability is more centralized. So when, for example, there is a vulnerability in Auth0, like in this case, there was a bug in 2018, a JSON web token invalidation bug. It affected many clients. So there was a legacy API, and this legacy API was misused by miscreants, or could have been misused by miscreants. And basically, this could have affected many clients of Auth0. So that's why it's really crucial that when we depend on certain services, we have to take into account other threats. So the next one in the list is the cross-site scripting. So this used to be A7, so it just bumped up quite a lot. And it's quite controversial why you say that cross-site scripting is on the third item. So here is a bit of research behind it. So first and foremost, cross-site scripting was the top one security vulnerability on the HackerOne platform. So last year, HackerOne companies, so anyone who subscribed for HackerOne is a bug bounty platform, so paid approximately $4.2 million just on cross-site scripting, which is 26% larger than last year. So cross-site scripting is actually leading the bounty lists, and companies paid $4.2 million on cross-site scripting, which is a lot. So, and in contrast to that, Mario Henry, he's the guy on the right side, in a talk in 2018 on AppSec EU, said that, guys, cross-site scripting is simply dead. We just don't get it. So what did he mean? That is that there are solutions to defeat cross-site scripting. 97% of cross-site scripting can be evaded simply by just using CSP, for example, or sanitizers or certain escape methods embedded into frameworks like Angular. So if you just simply use these frameworks, you are good enough. But the problem is that we just don't enable these methods, or we think that the built-in methods are good enough. And here's the thing. So cross-site scripting in practice, 2019 and Google search bar. Yes, that's a reality. In the main Google search bar in 2019, there was a bug bounty hunter guy. Actually, he was, I think, one of the developers of a cross-site scripting defeat framework. I don't remember exactly. The thing here is that this guy found a cross-site scripting bug inside Google search bar. That's a wow. So I think if somebody hears it, nobody believes it, but this is a fact. And what it means is that there is no brute software. So takeaway number one is that even if we think that somebody is a big fish like Google and they add a lot of security protections into their system, at the same time, they are not, I would say, they are not silver bullets. So they cannot make sure that they won't be affected at all in software breaches. So what I suggest here is to know where the weaknesses are. So even if we take the risk of not fixing all the bugs, all the vulnerabilities, we should at least know that these weaknesses are there in our systems and we accept those. And with this word that I accept these weaknesses, I just simply say that, okay, maybe here comes an ODay vulnerability that was never ever exploited before and comes, and a targeted actor comes and just simply misuse my system and steals our credentials or whatever he does or she does. But the thing here is that I took this risk, and that's it. So A4, sensitive data exposure. So we just position one by one compared to the 2017 list. And why it's a big thing is that many records are leaked. One of the examples in this presentation is that you see nearly 11 billion records from an adult site Camp 4 in March 2020. That's a lot. And before that, there was a Yahoo breach. It affected like 3 billion records. So it's a lot. And the other thing is that sensitive data is coming from many resources. And at the same time, we need to do certain methods to protect our systems against that. For example, better encryption algorithms, and here is legal things like GDPR. And actually, the fine of GDPR is quite a few, like British Airways, $100 million. So insecure data serialization, A5. So this was merged with with XXE, and this is the reason why this, because the approach to attack these vectors is quite common, but from protection side of view, so from your side, guys, it's quite different. So this is one of the things we have to take into consideration. It's not widespread, but it can lead to remote code execution, which is not that nice. So broken access control, another name, authorization problems. So it's difficult to detect because, for example, if you just put certain if conditions or certain controls like annotations into your code, and you believe that this is good enough, the problem, I believe, is that you simply miss the centralized authority checks. So most of the time, we just keep building system, adding new features, new services. These are super embedded and super connected, interconnected. But at the same time, the problem is that we miss the centralized authority checks and we fail at a certain point. So takeaway number 2, black swans do exist. If you have never read this book, I really suggest to do it. The impact of the highly improbable. It means that the smallest things, the smallest changes in our life that we cannot predict will affect our life the most. For example, many breaches just happen from a small niche problem, but at the same time, it resulted in a huge breakage. So the next one, A7, insufficient logging and monitoring. So yeah, if you just don't do logging and monitoring, you are going to amplify the damage attackers may cause. It means that, for example, if you don't have a sentry or something like a simple monitoring system in the background, you are going to just miss the most important bugs, because bugs and security issues are quite similar to each other. So when a bug is in the software is visible under development, so you see it when you write a code. But at the same time, security issues are something that you realize only in the release, after it's being released. so in the production system, and it's invisible, and you realize it when it was misused. So, and here's the thing: the SolarWinds breach, it actually affected many clients, US government and a lot of clients, and it was a monitoring system. So what happens when a monitoring system itself is breached? So this is a funny story. Server-side request forgery. Let's talk about this a little bit more. So this is a new candidate. I don't know how many of you heard about this. So we do a lot of production in our system. And you know, we have firewalls, we have perimeter security, we have application security, and a lot of things. But what happens when we can somehow enforce the application server itself to make an internal request that we can control? And this is the server-side request forgery. So here's how it looks like. So on the left bottom corner, you see the attacker is visiting a front-facing site. And what she does is that just simply modifies a HTTP request. For example, an HTTP post issues an HTTP post request to this site. And if this site, for example, refers to an API in somewhere in its parameters, and the attacker can modify it, that, for example, this API call should be made from localhost, for example, or not the API call itself, but you would like to access an admin site that is accessible only from localhost. So basically what she does is that you visit the site from a request with the request. This request is passed to the internal services. And as the internal services check whether the request is coming from an external resource or an internal resource, it may allow to access an internal resource that is not front-facing. But the result is returned back to the attacker. So it can be a blind SSRF when the result is just returned, or it can be a real one. A real one means, of course, the blind is also that. But you can redirect the request to a third-party system. And it looks like that the web application itself did the request, but it didn't. So a recent server-side request forgery bounty from 2020, December, was on Facebook, a 10K bug. So here is the use case. So the attackers could send internal requests to the Facebook corporate network with 3 simple steps. So the first one is subdomain enumeration, file brute forcing, and JavaScript analysis. So there's a site called the Facebook.com. As far as I know, original Facebook was called the Facebook.com. So that's why I think they still have this URL as a potential URL. And for some reason, they have this fishme.facebook.com, the Facebook.com subdomain. So when you want to access this site, as you see, it's not allowed. So this is the step number 1. You realize that there is a subdomain.fishme.facebook.com, but it cannot be accessed normally. But the guy, what he did is just started brute forcing this path, fishme.facebook.com/star.js. So whatever URL is, or whatever file is coming under the double stars, it exists, it will be returned by the dictionary brute force attack. So what he did is he found this home.js file. And in this home.js file, there's an interesting function called send fish request. And actually, this function just used an XML HTTP request to request data from specific links. So this one is the fish get item data.ashx. So this is the file that is used. And under the EWS URL, you could pass a URL to visit. And this goes down to the internal Facebook network. So what he did is he fabricated this request. So he visits the fishme.facebook.com, he passes the file to it, and afterwards he gives them certain parameters, item ID, and the second one is the most important thing, that here comes a local host as a URL and a certain port. that of course was somehow revealed by the guy itself, and a token that is required to forge such a request. So basically, you have the URL that is normally not accessible. You found a file that you know that it's going to use a parameter called AWS URL as a redirect URL. The guy gave it a local host with a port number. So basically, this file is going to make an internal network call to the Facebook domain. And as a result, it's going to return something. So here is the result. So as you see in the browser, if you copy this whole URL stuff, so fish me the facebook.com, fish get item data, ASHX, item ID, EWS URL, here is the local host, and afterwards comes the port. So this is when the attack is triggered. And you see that there is no real result. I mean, it returns just an error page. But the thing here is that the attacker could somehow access this site. And so originally it was disallowed, and now it's available. So it was 10K from Facebook. So here's the next things. Don't underestimate bugs. So what it means is that I saw it many times that you can't. So when a breach happens, it's just okay. It can happen like you have an S3 bucket, and you just for whatever reason you forgot to make it secret and to configure this private, and you are done. You are breached. But in many cases, there is an attack chain. And this attack chain uses many small steps to finalize the attack, to execute the real attack. So the takeaway here is that don't underestimate even the smallest bugs, because they may lead to an attack chain, or can be an item in an attack chain. So if we just go back a few slides, you see that we had 3 simple steps: subdomain enumeration, file brute forcing, and JS analysis. And of course, this attack is not super complicated. But at the same time, it's come on, 10K, and from Facebook. So it's something, right? So, and I know that there are even worse attack vectors than this. So A9 non-vulnerabilities. So this is one of the things that it's really tricky, really interesting, because we know that the bug is there. But for some reasons, because of the lack of processes, or for certain reasons, we just too slow to patch it. And as a result, we leave an open window for attackers. So this was like in Equifax. So they were like waiting for 2 to 3 months, or I don't know, I don't want to say the untruths, but so it was like a couple of months when they left an attack window, and Equifax was just simply breached. And as a result, 147 million social security numbers were leaked. It's quite a lot. And this happens because you simply don't fix your software. So here comes A10, security misconfiguration. So here is actually the story of the leaky AWS S3 buckets, for example. So what we do now is that we are moving to the cloud more and more, and we are exposed to their resources, which is great. It means that, for example, we have access to reliability, we have access to scalability, we have access to a lot of internal services that are there. But at the same time, we don't realize that we lose something. And what we lose is that we are more and more embedded and more dependent on these services. So if something happens, so we just simply don't use them properly because we don't have the knowledge, or for whatever reason, we just forget it, then it's not so nice. So in 2017, October, Accenture, they were, so 4 S3 buckets were leaked. Actually, they were just simply public, so it's not leaked, but they misconfigured it. One of them contained more than 100 gigabytes of client data, passwords in plain text, and a lot of things like this, and pen test reports from their clients, and a lot of things. So please always try to configure your buckets to be private. But here's the thing, so that the more dependent we are, the more exposed, the more vulnerable we are. So we have to always take into account what we risk. Of course, I'm totally about, so I totally like the cloud native operation. This is what we also use, but we have to accept the threats as well here. So takeaway number one, convenience must be built on security best practices. Otherwise, even the largest castles fall apart. That is what I said. So back to my feelings. So in the last couple of years, I always felt that what we do is just an obstacle to developers. Developers simply ignore security and they don't like it, because all the time what I felt is that we just stop them from releasing code faster. And this is true if we take it from that perspective. But if we flip it and we change our perspective, we may find something in common between security and developers. So what is that? What if you start thinking with a security mindset before you write code? What if security comes at the right phase? What if security is not an afterthought? What if security is not an interrupt to your life? Because most of the time what we see is that security is like testing a couple of years ago, you remember, I think. So testing was, I don't know, it was totally ignored by many developers because it slows us down. It just doesn't allow me to release new code and a lot of things. But now I think if you are thinking in a product, not just in a project or something, an open, I wouldn't say open source, but they are also really systemized. But I would say that you are thinking about just a pet project. So if you are thinking about a product, tests are a must today. And security is not different from tests. Security is just like, the problem with security is that we are never taught about security. And for this reason, we are just, so when we would like to have an answer to these security problems, we visited certain security issues in the top 10. So when we have the right processes in place, then we can embed security into the development. So here comes the idea from shifting our mindset from reactivity to proactivity. So that's why I really like DevSecOps. So DevSecOps is an idea when, so originally we had developers and we have the operation guys. And it was just two words. Once you created a software, and after a certain point, you just put in the operation, and it was two different areas. And we had to realize that it's much better to interweave these two tasks, and the very same guys who just does development could release code also at the same time, if we have, of course, the proper tooling and the proper team behind it. So idea came that what if security is also part of this story? Because how it goes now is that you have the developers or the operation guys or the DevOps guys, let's say that. And you have the, for example, the security guys, the pen testers. And what we do now is that we keep adding security champions into this whole process. Security champions are guys who should do security code reviews, who should be responsible for security, so writing security tests, and so on. But the problem is that sometimes these tasks would be the tasks of developers. So if DevSecOps is working, we wouldn't need security champions. We wouldn't need them because everybody knows that from the very beginning, I designed something with a security mindset. So what we see is that developers make hundreds of decisions every day impacting security. So what it means is that when you are writing code, you are just simply, so what I did usually back in time, that you are just starting designing something first for example, you have a new idea to create, you are thinking about it, and afterwards you sit down and write a code. But if in this process, in this brainstorming process, you just simply don't have security there, then it will be an afterthought. And at that time comes the security guy, comes a breach, or comes whatever, and you are going to you need to fix these things. So what we need to do is that understand that our problem is our lack of knowledge. So OWASP top 10 is mainly considered as a waking alarm, as a checklist. So for example, OWASP top 10 is like just, let's say that this is a minimal requirement that you need to face and understand. But if we consider it as a holistic approach, it won't solve our problems at all. So OWASP top 10 is helping you to take into account certain problems, and hopefully before you release the code, but it won't solve your problem. And the problem is that we lack the knowledge, and we lack the knowledge because we were never taught. So what I think the most important would be is to, so what we can do, how you can ship code more secure, right? And this is one of the main topics. So understand security to benefit from it. So what do I mean here? First and foremost, in order to resolve problems, we need to understand the other party as well. So security guys, what do they do? What do they spend their time with? How do they approach security problems? Why do they have these problems? If you are getting closer to their world, and also security guys are getting closer to your world as a developer, then you have a chance to make something together. And if you have knowledge about the other party, if you have knowledge about the if you have knowledge about other people, you have a chance to make something together. And this is the only step I think we need to do, is to getting a bit more understanding about security. And if you know this, then you are going to know how to use a proper framework. For example, many issues, if you just go back into the list, for example, cross-site scripting. Cross-site scripting was one of the things that cross-site scripting is like, if you have a content security pages, or if you have a proper framework, and if you use normal sanitizers, you can protect your systems against cross-site scripting. Or let's say insufficient logging. If you start creating a logging environment with a proper mindset, then it's going to work. So the thing here is that if we are thinking advanced, we are decreasing the costs of these breaches. We are decreasing the cost of our pain. We are decreasing the costs of our ignorance, because most of the time, many problems are coming from our ignorance of okay, security is going to be solved at a certain point. It's not going to be solved at a certain point, because security will be solved when you have the chance to solve it at the right time, at the very beginning, before you write a code. So today, I think I was a bit shorter, but this is what I wanted to tell you today. But at least we have a lot more time for questions. So please raise your hands or questions or anything I would like you would like me to answer. And I'm really happy to go back into any items you would be interested in, or anything. I'm happy to answer your questions. So that was it. Thank you. Chat. Yes, so if you don't have any questions, I hope you will have, but
Sorry, Gabor, we have one question in the Q&A section. I will read it. If some presentation from a perspective on an average developer, it is always to grab and apply security fixes and test for vulnerabilities. As you mentioned, we need to shape our mindset Do you have any suggestions to it? I'm sorry, I'm a little bit tired, so my English is not perfect. Sometimes for me, it feels like I could only learn from actually exposed risks instead of preventing them.
Thank you. Really great question, really profound question. So let me just answer with the story of my story. So many times I was asked to so I put it this way. To start preventive security is tough indeed. The reason for this is that we just miss the guidelines. So if we go back to in the presentations, so here we are. So this is a guideline. But for example, okay, university is just a content of tables. I would say just because today many education moved to online platforms, and what we really need to have from these platforms, from these education platforms, is that to give us a guideline, to give us a content of tables that, hey, please do this, afterwards do this, and here are the sources that you need to do. And of course, if you have a teacher that explains you something with a nice approach, that is also really useful. But many times, why we don't have this preventive approach is that we simply do not have the knowledge how to start it, how to start from the very beginning. And I think to do this, we need to have a cultural shift. We need to have a cultural change. I don't know if you are working for a company which have I don't know internal trainings, but I think definitely this is one of the things which should be part of a cultural change, because everything is about processes. So you need a cultural change to make preventive steps for better security, but also need processes to support these cultural changes. And for example, if you, for example, in a sprint, you are told to release these and these features in 2 weeks, and you don't have time at all to do anything else. And for example, the product guy will not add any new items, any new issues about security into your sprint. You will simply ignore it, and you are, in a race to have something ready. And but if the process itself, so the development process itself, helps you to it gives you time to brainstorm about security. So for example, if you have a new feature to be created, let's say you are writing a new identity check, you are thinking about whether to depend on OutZero or Okta or an identity platform, or write it by yourself. If this decision is made quickly and you don't have time to think about not only the functional advantages and disadvantages, but also the security advantages and disadvantages, then it's going to bring you bad fruits like now. But I don't know if you heard about threat modeling. So threat modeling is one of the weapons that you can use, guys, because threat modeling is like an approach when you start thinking about something, a service, for example, before you actually start implementing it. But even if something is implemented, you can use it. There's even a card game, a threat modeling card game. So this card game is like you have French cards, a pack of French cards, and every card is you have the 4 colors, and you have all the card types that you have, the queen and the king and all these stuffs, and each one is coming with a certain threat vector, like, I don't know, a privilege escalation or denial of service. And what you do, guys, is that you simply start playing this game in a round, and you are getting together, and you are checking whether your system that you're actually talking about is vulnerable to denial of service, and just saying that, hey, if we misuse this service in this way, it could lead to a denial of service, and you get 1 score. And then in a very same round, if someone with a higher card, for example, this was a 2, and someone comes with a queen and says that, oh, but on this very same system, you could do a privilege escalation as well. Then you get an, I don't know, 2 scores, and you would keep playing. So these games are for start embedding security, the security by design principles into coding. So I don't know if I answered your questions, but I think the best way to learn is to do it in practice. So start using your willpower, start using the resources that you have around you to learn about security. Maybe it will be a bit ad hoc, but what you need to do is to think proactively. So this is the key, proactively. So once security is an afterthought, it's going to be a pain. The reason why security is a pain is that because it's an afterthought, because it's an interrupt, it's coming too late. It's like testing. If you invest into security at a later phase, then it's going to hurt. So when you shift security, it's said, shifting security to the left, it means that the earlier you start thinking about security, the better it is. And I think this is the key to make an early modification if something is wrong. But because once you made a decision, it's going to drive you to a total, to a way that it's really difficult to come back. And here comes, the breaches like Accenture breaches, Yahoo breaches, the Camphor breaches. I just mentioned a couple of them. So a small mistake, a really, really small mistake, a needle in the hay, you cannot find it normally. But once you decide to find these mistakes, because, for example, you are promoted inside a company that, hey, if somebody finds these bugs, it's going to be, I don't know, get a free beer or something like this, then something will start. And I think that's why the environment that you are working in is as important as your willpower, because if you have the processes and your willpower, you are going to succeed. If some of these are missing, then it's going to be much, much, much tougher, I think. I don't know if the answer was satisfactory.
We have another few more questions. Can you see it, Gabor, or do you want me to read it?
Where can I see it? Q&A?
In the bottom bar, Q&A. We have 4 more questions.
Panelists and attendees. No, I can't see it. Please.
Okay, then I read it. Another one question about anonymous attendee. Let's say that I have a pet project which is dear to me, but I'm not really aware of how to check against the OWASP top 10. Could you please give me advice what software I can use which reveal the I can't say this word, vulnerabilities for me so I can fix them?
So simply put, what you would like to do is to, so how to go through this list and what kind of resources you could use to fix your software, or at least check whether your system is or project is vulnerable against this. So injections, I think the most important thing here is that you use an object relational mapping, so an ORM in the background, use a proper programming language. So if you, for example, start writing code, of course, there are languages which are by design more secure than others. C is, C was designed decades ago. It was not designed with security mindset. But if you take into account Rust was just total rewrapping of the whole concept of security and embedded into a native language, into a native runtime environment. So I think picking the right programming language is also great. And also the programming language needs to be, popular enough to keep your software up to date. But, I know there are preferences. Somebody is more into Python, somebody else is more into Ruby, somebody is just JavaScript guy. Of course, there are personal preferences, but I think if you have options to choose from, I would also always suggest to pick a language that satisfies your needs for example, if you are writing enterprise software, of course, you will not choose assembly as a programming language, but you are going to choose C# or Java or something similar, Scala. So first, the language needs to meet your demands, the functionality demands, and afterwards your preferences. And of course, somewhere here, you need to think about security as an essential cornerstone here. So broken authentication is that you need to, again, always, so in order to prevent our system from a malicious actor, we need to think with their head. So when from security point of view, we are always taught to think as a hacker. So many hackers, many pen testers have difficulties to think with the mindset of developers. But I think this goes vice versa. But if you start thinking with the mindset of the other, then you are going to see what this world is. And what would you do to misuse your software? So you can, for example, start pen testing your own project. I think this is a great idea. So if you don't know how to protect against broken authentication, for example, so what it means, can I break my own software? Here's the thing. So you can start, I don't know, finding tools on the internet. For example, CQL map is one of the tools to find SQL injections in your code. So this is one thing, or many other free scanners. OWASP top 10. So OWASP itself. So OWASP is an organization, Open Web Application Security Project. So it contains many projects, and this top 10 list is just one of them. But if you visit their site, central site, you will find many projects. And some of these projects are static code analyzers, dynamic code analyzers. They have many tools, like, for example, like similar to, so OWASP proxies, so attack proxies, you can also find these things. So there are tools there, but I think the most important is to make the very first step. Don't try to bring a perfect solution. Start with a very small step and solve it. And when the success comes, you will find the next step. And this is what I suggest. I hope I answered your question. So the punchline here is that always do your best. It can be a minimum zero. It can be really a minimal effort, but do your best. And once you're starting to be involved more and more into this whole security stuff, you are going to see the beauties of this whole profession, and also you will understand a bit better the other side, the other bank of the river. Sylvie, can we, I hope.
Yes, we have another one. The next one is how to implement a robust sanitization against XSS, SQL injections, etc.
Yeah, so sanitization, like there's a tool, for example, called Bleach. It's like, the manga from Japan. It's the very same name. So there are tools like this. You can use it. And also, as I said, sometimes cross-site scripting is really interesting because, we have an Angular, and back in time we had Angular JS, and you could have server-side or client-side templating. So one of the cross-site scripting bugs were coming from the fact that on the server side you used a server-side templating, but on the client side, and also cross-site scripting production, some kind of sanitization. And on the client side, you use the Angular JS framework, and the mixture of these two productions resulted in a real cross-site scripting. So so picking the right framework is really essential. So here, yeah. So I don't know whether the question goes more. So sanitization, yeah, is find the alternatives of Bleach. I don't know how many other stuffs are there, but escaping is provided by the framework itself. I hope I answered your question. It's I feel a bit bad about this because I can't see your face and I don't know if you are nodding or just you are unsatisfied. It's quite weird to me anyway. Silly, please.
Okay, there's another one, the last one, and it's in Hungarian, so I will read it in Hungarian. Manapság elég ritkán fejlesztenek nulláról egy rendszert, hanem többnyire különböző frameworköket használnak. Hogyan lehetünk biztosak abban, hogy biztonsági szempontból megbízhatunk ezekben a frameworkökben?
Nagyon jó kérdés, magyarul válaszolok. So, for example, I translate it to English. Maybe it's better if there's somebody. So, so the question goes like this. We are not creating software today from zero, but we are dependent on many other components that we are reusing. And how can we make sure that these components are not vulnerable? And how can we make sure that we can find the bugs in these components and make a more holistic security overview of the whole system? So you remember the free open source report 2020? Actually, there's going to be a blog post from this whole presentation in a couple of days. So you are going to see the resources also linked. So this free and open source software report says that 60 to 80% of I would say more, 80 to 90% of all the codes in the world is coming from open source software. 80 to 90%. It's an estimated number, but it's large. So even commercial softwares like Microsoft Windows, we know that they reuse open source components. So first, if you never heard about Snyk, it's a must-have to use. So Snyk is a tool that is checking the third-party libraries that you are embedding into your software. They have a free option for open source project, but if you are coming from a company or from corporate background, you can use their subscription. They also have Docker or container scanners, so there are a lot of issues. So what they do is that they check what kind of libraries used with what version. You typically pin this version number, and they check whether there's a known bug against these numbers. And they are going to make a suggestion how to upgrade it. So what version number would be good. And also it checks the dependencies, whether there's a breaking change with other components that it uses. So Snyk, or alternatively, there was a Black Duck. The Black Duck was acquired by Synopsys. So, but this is more on a corporate side, so I don't think you will use it. So Snyk is one of the options to check the third-party dependencies in the libraries. And security is like everything in life. So you need to make sure that when you write a code, every aspect is handled. So if you're starting, so security by design. So when you brainstorm the functionality, you need to, even if it's reuses code, I know that you are going to depend on a code level from many other vendors, but not only the code itself that can go wrong, but how they communicate with each other. So there's a Facebook breach in 2018. There's like, as far as I remember, like 400K records were leaked, and the story was like Facebook created a video upload form. So you could say happy birthday to someone and upload them a video. The problem was that this video check was, so whether this video goes to the, and as a result, when you uploaded a happy birthday video, you could see all the contacts that it had. So there was a kind of a privilege check problem, because what you could do is that one of the services of Facebook checked whether you uploaded the video, but once the video was uploaded, it was checked whether, so you could make a request on behalf of Facebook app. So as a result, there was an authorization check, and the authorization check could be bypassed simply because the request was going on behalf of the Facebook app which had access to your profile. I think it was just, sorry, it was a bit too complex to explain it, and I don't remember all the details. But what I remember is that attacker used certain sequences of steps to steal this data, like here. Where was it? It's here. So it's not about only writing a secure code. It's how to mix those components, how to mix these services, how to make them communicate with each other. And as a result, you are going to have a better understanding, a more holistic view about the whole security aspects. So I hope I answered your question as well. I can't see your face, sorry.